When I was an engineer, I really believe this with all my heart, and no offense to you, sir, but I did not choose engineering because I like to chat with people. That was not my cup of tea. So I was the kind of person that would go to a function, they'd place me behind one of those 8-foot tables, and as an engineer I would represent projects to people like yourself that would come up to the table. And I had no problem doing that. I was very well trained. But if you put me into the reception like what we had earlier from 5 to 6 into the hospitality suite at the end of the day, I was like a fly on the wall. I had no idea how you're supposed to talk to anybody about anything beyond, what is your name, sir? Gary, what do you do? Gary would say whatever it is that he does, then he'd ask me what I do, and then what do you talk about after that? And I had no clue, but I figured it was just engineers that didn't know what to talk about after that. And that was one reason I started a business talking about something as silly as conversation skills. The second reason I had an epiphany to start a business talking about this topic is that in 1988, some of you may remember, Oprah that year in '88, both her and I, we lost 65 pounds that year. Now, Oprah is doing this again. But the only reason I'm telling this, I've since lost more. When you're like that in this world, you get excluded from a lot of things. So the girls didn't invite me to their birthday parties. Nobody asked me out for a date till I got out of college. My best friends were books. Books came easily. Sitting at a table, talking to people I never knew was completely out of the question. If somebody asked me a question, I'd respond. I just thought, how do these people do it that seem to be born with that gift? How are they doing that? And so I spent a year's worth of time on research, everything, icebreakers. What do you say to engage people in conversation? How do you get through one of those awkward moments at a table of 8, whether it be at a Rotary lunch, breakfast, or foundation meeting in October, where everyone introduces themselves, says what Rotary club they're in, and then sort of starts playing with their food, or now even worse, everybody has a device with them, so they start playing with their devices. Or they immediately turn to their spouses or their fellow Rotarians from their club and talk to them. How do you get through one of those moments? I researched listening skills that help develop rapport with people, conversation killers to avoid, even exit lines so that never again. In order to get away from someone, Gary, do you ever do this? Debra, I've got to go. I've got to call the babysitter. Out he flies. 5 minutes later, I find out his kids are grown and in college. There's ways to get away from people without lying to them, but ways to get away from people so they can't hold us hostage for one more moment than we are willing to be held hostage for. We're going to cover as much of that as we can, because here's the bottom line, I think, for every person in this room. There's mostly president-elects in this room, but there's a lot of people that are spouses. There's a lot of people that sit in different roles, but we are all Rotarians or family members of Rotarians. So what can we do to attract new members? And what can we do to enhance retention? And I think it's all about making people feel connected to a club. Yesterday, I'm in a breakfast club on Thursday mornings, and I went yesterday, and this is what I do when I walk into Rotary, and I do it wherever I go, and I want you to consider doing it. I walked into my Rotary club. I looked around the room, so there's probably 100 people there. We have 120 members, but it was packed yesterday. We had Lockheed Martin's chief engineer speaking. I think that's why we were so packed. We had a lot of guests. I looked around the room. Now I know everybody. I've been there over 22 years. Everybody's my friend. I looked around the room on purpose before catching up with my friends, because I'm always on the road, so I get there once a month. So I want to see my friends. I want to be with people I know. But I make myself walk into Rotary, and after the invocation, after the pledge, I look around the room and look for somebody who isn't talking to somebody. There's either shy people not talking to somebody, there's somebody that's very senior not talking to somebody because they get excluded, or in this case, the gentleman I walked up to, I said, hi, I'm Debra Fine, I'm a member of this Rotary Club. Clearly he was a guest because he didn't have a button on. I said, I'll answer that. Whose phone is that? I'll talk to anybody now. I said, you must be a guest. Who's your host today? He said, well, I don't really have a host. I visited once before, and they introduced me to the membership person, but I can't find her. I said, was it Karen Briggs? And he said, yeah. I said, I don't see her here either. I said, I'm glad to host you. So number one lesson is that this poor gentleman, because we're such a big club, and we're so friendly, and everybody's having so much fun, nobody noticed him. He walked in, he signed in, they let him sign in. I don't know if he paid or didn't pay. It turns out he's already submitted his application papers. But the key is I want you to consider, when you walk into your Rotary Club, but more important because you're president-elect, so you're busy, your members need to look around the room and look for that person that isn't already engaged in conversation and connect them to the club, even if they've been members for 15 years, but they're that person that sits at the same table every week. So this is why most of us don't walk up to people we don't know. It is not in my nature to walk up to this young man yesterday. His name is Tim. I'm an introvert. I just don't behave like one anymore. And at Rotary especially, I don't. Because I know what it's like. When I walked into that Rotary meeting the very first time, and I hope that you will believe me because it is true, I looked around at a room. There wasn't one woman in that room. So that was 20-some years ago, right? Over 22 years ago by the time I joined. And I'll just tell you that I was a lot younger then. Do you know what I did until it was time to sit down for the meal? Every time I'd come to Rotary, I would go hide in the restroom. And I had it all to myself because there were no other women there. Until they rang the bell and it was time to sit down. That's how intimidated I was. And it was nobody's fault but my own. But can you not imagine? Maybe I'm not the only one. Maybe that's why we struggle sometimes with diversity, because somebody feels like they're the only one walking into the room. Maybe it's just an ordinary person like me who just doesn't know anybody yet. So we all have to make the effort of walking up to new people and engaging them in conversation. And most of us don't do it because it is a risk. It's risky because you might reject me. You might reject me. So we don't walk up to people and attempt to engage them in conversation. And yet, I'm going back to Denver tomorrow morning. Today, it was a direct flight to Columbus out of Denver, and it was one of those small planes, which I'm very accustomed to. And I don't know why, but we had a very shaky, I don't know what's happening in the middle of the country. They had the seatbelt sign on most of the way, and it was awful. I don't even get nervous usually. I was nervous today. That's how bad it is. So what is riskier, walking up to somebody new at a Rotary meeting or at any occasion and attempting to engage them in conversation so they see what Rotary looks like? We at last year's district conference, we asked everybody that was in some way connected to Debra Fine, meaning if I had invited you into Rotary and then you invited a friend of yours and we had 58 people stand up. And I count my husband in one of those people, yeah. But people don't know what Rotary looks like. Rotary looks like us, but it's up to us to let people know we're Rotarians. I'm going to give you some tools to do that as well. But first, walk up to new people, be the first to say hello. Most of us are looking for the perfect line. The perfect line at Rotary is easy. Jim, I asked you today, what got you involved with Rotary? His father got him involved with Rotary. Everybody here has a story about how they got involved with Rotary. I could have asked anybody here today, what's your favorite project that you've worked on? I could have asked anybody here today, what's the greatest challenge for your Rotary Club? And we would have talked about that. But there is no perfect line if someone decides to reject you. If someone walks up to me at a function and I check them out, which is what everybody here does, we all check people out. And if I decide I'm not interested in talking to that person, or their name tag says the name of a bank and I'm there to meet lawyers, people are like that. They work rooms. There is no perfect line to engage them. They will reject you and give you one-word answers no matter what. Stop looking for the perfect thing to say. Be the first to say hello.